So you want to start your own clothing brand, but you don't know where to start. I'm here to tell you it's absolutely possible. Having started my own cycling apparel brand in 2022, I'm going to talk you through a 10-step framework which you can follow and revisit as many times as you need to in order to start making that dream a reality. I'm excited to share this. Let's do it. So I realised when planning this video that there's actually 11 steps, so be sure to stick around to the end because it's the 11th step which will really make the difference between success and failure. Step 1 is nailing your brand concept, why your brand exists. People have a complex cocktail of motivations for why they buy clothing, which makes it such an interesting market to be involved in. Remember, what you do and how you do it is important, but why you do what you do is the most powerful way of connecting with your target customer. I really can't overstate how important it is to have clarity around that brand purpose. It has to be the foundation of everything that you do. Once you've got that nailed, everything else just kind of flows naturally from it. Whether it's the products that you create and the designs to the communications that you have across all the channels in your website. Because it's going to be one of the critical things that sets you up for success and differentiates you in a crowded market. It's a huge topic, so I'll leave a link in the description for another video where we really go deep on this subject. Step 2 is deciding on a brand name and logo. As you'd imagine, I watched a lot of clothing brand videos myself before launching my own brand, and what I found was a lot of people were recommending this step as the first step. Yes, it's really important, but more important is that you start with that brand concept and brand purpose, because what you can then do is create a brand name and logo that's perfectly aligned with that. So how do you go about coming up with that perfect brand name? Well, it's going to take a lot of deep thought and research, but I recommend that you spend some time in and amongst your target customer in their community on social media. It's probably where you are already. Really listen out for the language that's being used in the content there, and also look at what your competitors are doing. Start making some notes, dropping some words down on paper, play around with them. It's not going to come to you overnight, but eventually, as you start to really sort of absorb yourself in this over a number of days and weeks, something will rise to the surface. Once you've arrived at that perfect brand name, have a think and do some research into whether or not it's been trademarked as a brand name within your particular niche or perhaps another niche. In the UK, for instance, you can check on the IPO website, the Intellectual Property Office, to see whether your particular brand name or logo has been trademarked or not. If it has, it's perhaps something that you want to stay clear of. And if you're watching from another country, there will be similar Intellectual Property Office type websites that you can check for yourself. Now, you don't have to register your brand name and logo as a trademark, but it's something to consider for the future as a means of protecting what might become a very valuable asset over time. Also think about whether your preferred domain name is going to be available or not. There are loads of websites where you can check this, but all of my domain names are registered on godaddy.com, and you can perform a simple search there and check whether or not yours is going to be available. Finally, think about whether you can use your brand name across all of your social media channels. Check whether the social media handles have been used by somebody else. The last thing that you want to do is create a brand name and find that you can't utilize it across your key social media platforms. When it comes to designing a logo, you've got loads of options. Maybe you're getting into this because you've got some design experience of your own, or maybe you know somebody that does. If, like me, and design wasn't your greatest strength, then there are loads of websites out there that you can use, such as Fiverr and Design Crowd. You can log on there, identify a designer whose portfolio you really like, and you can create a design brief specifically for that designer to work on, or you can perhaps open it out to a design contest and get a number of designers feeding into that design brief. I suppose what I'm saying is, if you feel that design is not your strong point at the moment, you've got other areas of strength for starting this clothing brand, then don't let that stop you. There are people out there that can help you. You know, the world is a much smaller place now, and it's very easy to tap into skills that can allow you to concentrate on other areas. Step 3 is to create a customer profile for your target customer. It can be very easy to fall into the trap of creating a brand with a broad appeal in order that you can convert a higher number of customers. But the reality is that this is the worst thing that you can do. You really do need to be very specific and targeted with who you are approaching with your clothing brand. The market is so highly saturated with clothing brands, there's so much choice for customers out there that you really do need to target a very specific shopper and align your brand and values to that particular customer set. It's likely that when developing your brand concept and your brand name and logo that came out of that concept, that you've already got an idea of who this customer is. The task here is about being very specific and going very deep on that particular customer profile. Firstly, you need to identify their demographic profile. So how old are they? Where do they live? Who do they live with? What do they do for a living? How much disposable income have they got? But then take this to the next level and do some psychological profiling on your customer. Think deeply about what their goals are, their challenges, their desires and their fears. Write this down, really visualize it in order that you can develop a brand whose values align most closely to those. I've left a link in the description to a free template that you can use when developing this psychological profiling for your own target customer and brand. If you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. Step 4 is about deciding which products you're going to sell in order to satisfy the needs of the customer that you've identified in step 3. So, for example, will it be t-shirts only, or will it be a combination of t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, caps, socks, hats, accessories? Really think about what is realistic for you to achieve with the budget that you've got. And one of the key points here is not to get carried away in the early stages in terms of breadth of range. It is possible to grow your brand from a very small outlay in a sustainable way. Don't be tempted to overcommit yourselves in terms of inventory at the outset. There will be time for you to grow and nurture your brand, so just bear that in mind. This is the stage where you think about the whole product and what the customer is going to receive on their doorstep. So think beyond purely the garments that you're going to be selling, but also think about the packaging and every single element that's going to go into that finished product that is going to make your brand stand out from the competition and make it worthy of being bought again. Again, I'm going to leave a link in the description to another video where we really go deep on how to create some really next level packaging for your clothing brand. Step 5 is about identifying suppliers and a production method for the product range that we've just talked through. The first question to answer then is whether you'll be sourcing your garments from overseas, finished, or whether you'll be sourcing blank garments domestically to have printed. Now, I can't speak for the overseas route because it's not a route that I took, and there were 2 reasons for that. The first of which is I didn't need to have product designed and created overseas in order to create a finished product that was going to serve the needs of the customer that we've identified in previous steps. It was also something to do with my perceived risk around sourcing from overseas. I felt that there was too much risk for me with that route in terms of communicating overseas, the logistics, the potential for failure felt high, and it really wasn't necessary. Hence I went down the domestic route, which we'll talk about now. So let's assume, like me, that you've decided to source your garments domestically. Then you have 2 broad options: print on demand and inventory. So with the first option, print on demand, this really is the hands-off, low-risk approach to starting a clothing brand. You do not need to carry an inventory or fulfill the orders yourself from your home or your premises. You would simply partner with a print-on-demand service provider and take orders either through your website or perhaps one that's hosted by them. They would then print the t-shirt and ship that to your customer. So it all sounds hugely positive, right? Well, there are 2 downsides to this really. The first of which is in relation to the amount of profit that you will make per transaction. Because it is a hands-off approach and you're using a third party to both print and fulfill, you are going to make a smaller cash margin per transaction. Now, that is fine if your attitude to risk is low, you don't have the ability to fulfill orders. It's just something to bear in mind. The second downside is that you lose control of fulfillment to your end customer. It is far more difficult for you to personalize your packaging and what your end customer is receiving. It also tends to be quite a slow process in terms of fulfillment. You can read some real horror stories around customers taking 2 or 3 weeks to receive an order. And that really is not acceptable in this day and age of people expecting things within a couple of days, worst case scenario. The second option is to carry your own inventory or stock. And the pros and cons of this are really just the opposite of what we've discussed for print on demand. This is the route that I took because ultimately I wanted to maintain full control of everything that the customer was receiving. I took it to the next level in terms of deciding to also print everything myself. So I print and hold inventory and fulfill all of my orders myself. Now, this is great in one respect. It gives you absolute control of everything that you're doing with your brand and allows you to make greater profit for each item that you sell. But it is bloody hard work. It is really, really hard, and it is absolutely doable, but it is difficult. Certainly in the early stages, whilst volumes are low, the inventory route is not well set up for that, hence why a lot of people get started with print on demand. But I'm in this for the long haul really, so I'm taking the pain now in order that hopefully the brand grows to the point where an inventory route and printing myself becomes really sustainable, profitable business model. So regardless of whether you're going down the print on demand or inventory based model, there are 3 choices broadly speaking when it comes to how you're going to have these garments printed. We have heat transfers, direct to garment, and screen printing. Heat transfers are the lowest quality route into this and not something that I would recommend if you are serious about developing and growing a brand. Perhaps more suited to custom work where you're not really looking to build a brand but perhaps looking to sell a printing service. But as a means of starting, it could be a possible route in for you. If you are looking to take this on and do it yourself, it is possible to do this with a minimal amount of capital outlay, and it's not very demanding in terms of space. So this is something that you could quite easily set up in your spare room, for example. The second option is a direct to garment solution, which is typically what's offered by a print on demand service. These are really well set up for single item print runs or small print runs, or print runs that involve a high number of colours, complex print designs, for example. The third route is screen printing, which is a centuries-old process of pushing ink through a silk screen stencil onto a blank garment. It is probably the most widely used printing process for the apparel industry, and it's well set up for large print runs, the opposite, if you like, of the sort of print on demand direct to garment route. So if I was you, I would definitely go down the screen printing route. You've got 2 options. You can identify a reliable local screen printer who understands what you're about and what you're trying to achieve with your brand. Try form a really good relationship with them for the outset, and that will pay for itself in the long run. Or you do what I've done, which is educate yourself, put a bit of money aside in order that you can get yourself set up to do this yourself. If you want to go down that route, then drop me a note in the comments below. I'll be happy to put together some further videos on exactly how I do what I do. Step 6 is fulfillment. Assuming you've gone down the inventory based route such as myself, then you really need to consider how you're going to fulfill your orders in terms of packaging the product and also the courier service that you're going to use. It's really easy to neglect this and how time consuming it is within the whole process, particularly if you're doing this alongside a day job. So for me, this involves printing a packing slip from the Shopify backend, paying for and printing a shipping label, attaching hang tags, folding. We also wrap all of our garments in tissue paper, and obviously we then place them, in our case, into a box which is then taped. Now all of that can be quite time consuming, which is very sort of manageable in the early stages while orders are low, but something that you need to bear in mind as orders and volumes start to grow. How are you going to be able to manage that? Can you do it yourself? Do you need some help at some point? You also need to consider which courier service you're going to use, which is going to be an evaluation of their price, their service and their convenience. In the case of us in the UK, we use the Royal Mail's tracked service, which is linked to the Shopify backend. So anytime I get an order via Shopify, that automatically links through to the Royal Mail's website, where I can go on, pay, print a packing slip, and attach that to the package. It's a really simple way of doing it. If you'd like to see a video on how that's integrated, then drop me a note. Step 7 is establishing your pricing strategy. You need to consider what is a viable price that you can charge for the product that you're offering relative to that that's available through the competition. And what does that price translate to in terms of a profit margin per item? You also need to take into account whether or not you'll have any costs associated with paid advertising, which you may like to use in order to generate traffic to your website. It's not essential, it's perfectly possible to get by and grow your brand in the initial stages using purely organic means. It's what I did. I've dabbled with paid advertising, but it's not really generated any results for me based upon the amount that I've spent, which has been very small. So don't be put off by growing this in a sustainable way. One little tip that I have for you when preparing your financial information is to not underestimate the proportion of your sales that will be sold at a discount. Certainly in the early stages, it's likely that you will need to do some sale activity in order to generate those initial sales. So don't underestimate what role and impact that's going to have on your profit margins. Step 8 is creating an online shop for your brand. Now, this doesn't have to be difficult at all. There are so many online platforms out there that allow you to get set up without any coding experience, up and running and selling within 24 hours. Personally, I use Shopify, which costs me about £20 or $25 per month. And in addition to that, they will charge in the region of 2% per transaction plus 25 pence. It's very, very reasonable. And I started off by using one of their free themes. I used the Dawn theme to get started, but I realized within 3 or 4 months of trading that it was worth spending the extra on one of their premium themes just to get that extra level of functionality within the website that made it look, really spot on. Step 9 for your brand is marketing. Okay, so you've done a lot of the hard work now, you're almost on the home straight. You've created a compelling brand concept, developed a commercially viable product, and a website that you can sell it on. What you need now is customers. For the majority of you, this is going to come down to how you activate on your social media platforms. Think very, very carefully about where your customers are spending their time. There are obviously a multitude of different platforms that you can play on, and I would recommend that on the outset that you concentrate on 1, 2, maybe 3 platforms at most where you can really begin engaging your customers and sharing your brand. As I said before, don't underestimate the potential for zero cost organic reach on these platforms, particularly with the emergence of vertical video these days. It is possible to grow your brand without spending anything on paid advertising. So don't forget that. And what I would encourage you to do is really start building relationships with people on these platforms. Come from a place of giving rather than taking. Develop some genuine relationships with people, interact, and I think over time what I've found and what you will find as well is that people will see what you are doing with your brand. They'll see the hard work that you're putting into it, particularly if you're sharing some of the behind the scenes activity, things that people can really value and appreciate and take an interest in. They will support you eventually. Maybe not in the first couple of weeks or so, but over time you will develop the relationships and people will reward you with orders. That's certainly what I've seen, and I highly recommend that you do the same as well. Equally, do be open to the potential for paid advertising on some of these platforms. I'm not ruling it out at all. I've certainly experimented with Facebook and Instagram ads and also Google AdWords and Google Shopping. I've not put an awful lot of money into this because I've not had the capital to spend on it, and probably because of that I've not seen a huge amount of reward, and I was probably doing it in the early stages of the brand when the website wasn't really functioning at its best, so I was driving people to a website that was less than optimum, shall we say. If I was to look at doing that now, then I think things might be a little bit different. So don't rule it out. Spend some time upskilling yourself on some of these areas in order that you can be prepared when the time comes to invest a little bit of cash. In reality, your marketing strategy over time is likely to be a blend of organic and paid advertising. and that mix is going to change over the life of your brand, and only you will be able to best judge what that looks like for the launch. But I wish you every success with it. If you've started already, drop me some comments below and let me know how you're getting on, and let everybody else know how you're getting on as well. It'd be great learning for all of us. Don't neglect to begin building your customer email list, typically via some sort of pop-up on your website. It's a great way to build a loyal, engaged audience over time, and eventually you'll start to see some sales coming through from that activity. I know I have. Step 10 is putting together a business plan. Don't be daunted by this. If you've followed all the previous steps, then it's simply a case of documenting all the answers to the questions and issues that we've discussed as part of this video. Okay, so you remember I said this was actually an 11-step process rather than 10. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that step 11 is actually not a step at all. It's a mindset, and it's a mindset that's going to allow you to be successful where others fall by the wayside. And that mindset is about adopting 100% belief in everything that you're doing and what you've set out to achieve. There will be really difficult times during the first 12 months of your clothing brand. There will be times when you perhaps question what you've started, and maybe people close to you will also question that as well. It takes time for the results to come through. It is really the ultimate in terms of delayed gratification. It's about putting in the time, the work now, in the belief, the 100% belief that you will start to see the benefit of that further down the track. And I'm sure you will do. I know that I have. There are things that I put in place 12 to 18 months ago that I've only just started to see the benefit of now. And I'm still putting in a disproportionate amount of work versus the rewards that I'm receiving. But I think that is true of anything that's worthwhile doing in life. It's certainly true of starting a clothing brand. But enjoy the process. Go easy on yourself. I know that if you've come this far in the video that you are committed and passionate about what you're about to start. So as I say, be patient with yourself, be kind. You are going to make mistakes, but that's part of the process, isn't it? You know, we have to make these mistakes in order that we can learn, tweak and make things better. But enjoy it. I know you'll make a success of it. If you've got any questions at all, drop them in the comments below. I'm always happy to help and hear about what you're doing. So all the best with it, guys. See you in the next video. Cheers.